The progress of ignorance. We're so accustomed to hearing about the progress of knowledge that we forget it's nothing more than a figurative expression, a metaphor with no substance behind it. It's not a descriptive concept that mirrors reality, but rather an impression, a vague and often misleading one at that. The actual reality behind this expression is merely the accumulation of information, such as books, files, indexes, microfilms, and so forth. The growth of records and the number of people and institutions dedicated to producing them. This increase brings more precision and differentiation, no doubt. But to equate this with knowledge is as absurd as assuming that a freshman biology student immediately understands all of biology simply because they're surrounded by libraries, archives, and every record concerning the biological sciences. All this data represents only potential knowledge, a mere possibility of access to knowledge. It is not knowledge itself. The distinction becomes even clearer when we remember that nature itself, the entire universe of living beings, is a vast repository of biological knowledge, awaiting human comprehension and documentation. As soon as the information contained in this reservoir is transformed into human records, we say our knowledge has increased. But what happens when these records grow to such an extent that no single person can grasp them or even outline their organizing principles? For instance, how much of these accumulated records reflect the objective reality of living beings, and how much is just a reflection of the cultural codes and conventions through which they were viewed? Who can assure us that these amassed records accurately portray the evolution of acquired knowledge, and not merely the distortions, lapses, and shifts in understanding imposed by new conventions from one era to the next? Taking biology again as an example, we see that the initial layer of decipherable objects, the world of living beings, has been replaced by a second layer of objects, biological knowledge records. Deciphering this second layer is equally difficult, laborious, and often impossible. This scenario nowadays is true for all sciences. The incurable optimist might argue that the growing volume of records is offset by the progress in indexing methods, especially with the advent of computers. But this is an illusion. Converting printed records to digital ones is still just replacing one collection of objects with another collection, perhaps easier to physically handle, but no more intellectually digestible. Any scientist worth their salt today acknowledges that no one can master the entire field of their science, let alone all sciences. But rarely does anyone draw the inevitable conclusion. The progress of knowledge, even in a narrow field, is merely the growth of records that increasingly become undecipherable, a replacement of an impenetrable network of natural objects with an impenetrable network of cultural objects. The latter supposedly signify the former, but if access to natural objects is dependent on mastering the corresponding cultural records, it's clear that the cultural sciences are even more confused and nebulous than the natural sciences. This precarious mastery over records inevitably affects our understanding of the natural objects they are supposed to represent. Knowledge, strictly speaking, exists only in the mind of the knower, at the moment and to the extent that they know. A human being can know many things, can instantaneously grasp a vast expanse of knowledge, while simultaneously remaining completely ignorant of other areas crucial to the understanding of what they consciously embrace. When I read a book by Dr. Richard Dawkins, for example, I can see clearly the boundary between what he knows and what he does not, but which he uses to interpret what he does know. In other words, he doesn't fully grasp even what he claims to understand. Jean Piaget established a strict distinction between sciences, which he believed give us knowledge, and philosophy, which only provides a sense of direction. But to what extent does a person lost amid a sea of information possess real knowledge of it? You can, of course, know an enigma without knowing its solution. But what happens when you can't even clearly grasp the formulation of the enigma itself? In this case, disorientation slides into pure ignorance. The progress of knowledge, in this sense, necessarily implies a concomitant increase in ignorance. And when ignorance and knowledge are intertwined inseparably, ignorance prevails, for it is ignorance that shapes the form of the whole. It goes without saying that, when taken to its extreme, the inability to discern between knowledge and ignorance threatens not only the security of civilization, but the very integrity of human intelligence. The task of philosophy is to sharpen that discernment, and, in so doing, attempt to preserve the integrity of intelligence amid the simultaneous growth of both knowledge and error.